America, the land of the free, just got a whole lot louder. On April 5, 2025, millions of Americans took to the streets in an unprecedented display of unity and defiance. From bustling metropolises to quiet towns, a sea of humanity rose up with a single thunderous message: hands off. This wasn't about left versus right. It was about right versus wrong. People from all walks of life stood shoulder to shoulder, united by a common enemy and a shared sense of urgency. The numbers were staggering. Over 1,400 protests erupted across all 50 states, a vast and furious tapestry of dissent. State capitals were besieged, federal buildings ringed with demonstrators, and congressional offices flooded with calls and emails. This was a meticulously planned and executed operation, spearheaded by a coalition of over 600,000 registered attendees. The hands-off protests became a global phenomenon, a testament to the enduring power of collective action in the face of tyranny. This wasn't just about venting frustration, this was about demanding change. The organizers had articulated three core demands: a clear and concise platform for action. First, they demanded an end to the billionaire takeover of American democracy. They wanted a government that worked for the people, not for the highest bidder. Second, they demanded an immediate halt to the relentless assault on social safety net programs. Millions of Americans relied on these programs for their survival, and the protesters refused to stand by and watch as their lifeline was severed. Finally, they demanded an end to the administration's hateful and discriminatory rhetoric and policies. Amidst the sea of humanity, certain voices rose above the din. These were not just any voices, but those of individuals who had the courage to stand up and speak out when it mattered most. They were the ones who could articulate the frustrations, hopes, and dreams of the masses, transforming them into a powerful call for change. In Washington, D.C., a trio of progressive firebrands took to the stage, electrifying the crowd. These leaders were not just politicians, they were symbols of a new era, voices that resonated with the struggles and aspirations of millions. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar spoke of the courage it took for her, a refugee from Somalia, to stand up to the most powerful man in the world. Her journey from a war-torn country to the halls of Congress was a testament to the resilience and determination of those who refused to be silenced. "We will not be silenced," she declared, her words met with thunderous applause. Her message was clear: no matter the obstacles, the fight for justice and equality would continue. Representative Jamie Raskin delivered a searing indictment of Trump and Musk's assault on the rule of law. His words cut through the noise, reminding everyone of the principles that form the bedrock of democracy. "This is not normal," he thundered. "This is a crisis of our democracy." His impassioned speech served as a wake-up call, urging the crowd to recognize the gravity of the situation and to take action. Congressman Maxwell Frost, the youngest member of Congress, galvanized the crowd with the passion and energy of youth. His presence on the stage was a beacon of hope, a sign that the next generation was ready to take up the mantle of leadership. "This is not the end," he declared. "This is just the beginning." His words were a rallying cry, inspiring the crowd to continue their fight for a better future. "We are the generation that will reclaim our democracy," he proclaimed, his voice echoing the sentiments of countless young people who were ready to make their mark on history. "We are the generation that will build a more just and equitable future for all Americans." The crowd erupted in cheers, their collective energy a testament to the power of unity and the enduring spirit of activism. The hands-off protests didn't erupt in a vacuum. They were the culmination of years of pent-up frustration at the policies of the Trump administration. Trump stoked the flames of discontent, while Musk poured gasoline on the fire with his cold-hearted efficiency measures. Thousands of dedicated public servants were unceremoniously laid off as part of Trump and Musk's grand plan to streamline the government. The Social Security Administration, a lifeline for millions, was particularly hard hit, resulting in chaos and dysfunction. Trump and Musk's policies had a devastating impact on communities, forcing schools to close, libraries to shutter, and social services to be slashed. The hands-off protests were about real people whose lives had been directly impacted by the Trump administration. One such individual was Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian refugee who had come to the United States as a child. Khalil's activism made him a target. After attending a peaceful protest, he was arrested and detained by ICE agents. Khalil's case became a cause célèbre for the hands-off protesters, who saw it as a blatant example of the administration's willingness to silence dissent. Protests erupted outside the detention center where Khalil was being held, demanding his immediate release. After weeks of pressure, the government finally relented, dropping all charges against Khalil and releasing him from detention. The hands-off protests, while largely peaceful, were not without moments of tension. In Lafayette, Indiana, a seemingly innocuous encounter between protesters and a counter-protester quickly escalated. The incident occurred during a march where a man openly carrying a handgun began shouting obscenities at the protesters. The situation grew increasingly tense, with some protesters attempting to reason with the man while others shouted back. By the time police arrived, the man had drawn his weapon and was shouting threats. Police officers moved in and tackled the man to the ground, disarming him and placing him under arrest. The fight against the Trump administration's policies wasn't confined to the streets. It was a multifaceted struggle that spanned various arenas, including the judicial system. It was also being waged in the courts, where legal battles became a crucial front in the resistance against policies perceived as overreaching and unjust. One of the most significant legal battles involved the administration's attempts to undermine collective bargaining rights for federal employees. These rights had been hard-won over many years, and were seen as essential for protecting workers' interests. In a bold move, Trump issued an executive order that stripped away many of the collective bargaining rights that federal employee unions had fought for decades to secure. This executive order was seen as a direct attack on the ability of unions to negotiate on behalf of their members. The National Federation of Federal Employees and the American Federation of Government Employees immediately filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of Trump's executive order. They argued that the order not only undermined workers' rights but also set a dangerous precedent for executive overreach. The unions argued that the order violated federal law and the Constitution. They contended that the executive order was an unlawful attempt to bypass established legal frameworks designed to protect workers. The case eventually made its way to the Supreme Court, where it was one of the most closely watched cases of the term. The outcome of this case was seen as pivotal, not just for federal employees, but for the broader labor movement and the balance of power between the executive branch and workers' rights. The hands-off protests of April 5, 2025, were a watershed moment in American history. These protests marked a significant turning point, not just because of their scale, but because of the profound unity they represented. People from all walks of life, from different races, religions, and socioeconomic backgrounds, came together with a common purpose. They were united in their demand for justice and equality, and their voices echoed across the nation. Never before had so many Americans from such diverse backgrounds come together in such a unified and powerful display of dissent. The sheer diversity of the crowd was a testament to the widespread discontent and the universal desire for change. It was a moment where differences were set aside, and the collective strength of the people was on full display. The protests were a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to rise up against injustice and demand a better future. The energy in the air was palpable as passionate speeches and chants filled the streets. The determination on the faces of the protesters was clear. They were not just fighting for themselves, but for future generations. The protests undoubtedly had a significant impact on the national conversation, shining a spotlight on the injustices of the Trump administration. Media coverage was extensive, bringing the issues to the forefront of public discourse. The administration could no longer ignore the voices of the people, and the protests forced a national reckoning with the policies and actions that had led to such widespread discontent. However, it is difficult to say definitively whether the protests led to any concrete changes in policy. While the immediate aftermath saw a flurry of discussions and debates, the long-term impact on legislation and government action remains a topic of debate. Some argue that the protests were a catalyst for change, while others believe that more sustained efforts are needed to achieve lasting reform. Nevertheless, the hands-off protests should not be viewed as a failure. They were a powerful expression of the American ideal of dissent, planting the seeds for future movements for social justice. The imagery and symbolism of the protests continue to inspire new generations of activists, reminding us that the fight for justice is ongoing and that every voice matters. They were a powerful expression of the American ideal of dissent, planting the seeds for future movements for social justice. The hands-off protests serve as a reminder that change is possible when people come together with a shared vision. They have left an indelible mark on the nation's history, and their legacy continues to inspire those who strive for a more just and equitable society.